Welcome back to Midnight Narratives. I'm your host, and tonight we're traveling across the South China Sea to an island that most tourists visit for one thing, and one thing only: food. But beneath its pleasant exterior lies a location so spiritually corrupted, so steeped in tragedy, that locals refuse to spend the night there. This is the story of Bella Vista Villa, and the woman who turned it into Hong Kong's darkest magnet for death. Tuna Island sits just off the coast of Hong Kong, small enough to feel intimate, large enough to hold secrets. During the day, it's alive with families, tourists, and the aroma of street food. But locals know better than to stay after sunset. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Tuna had earned a haunting reputation. You've heard of Japan's Aokigahara Forest, that place of unimaginable darkness where people go to end their lives. Well, Tuna became Hong Kong's equivalent. The charcoal burning method became so prevalent on this island that local shopkeepers took matters into their own hands. They stopped selling charcoal to anyone who appeared to be a stranger, anyone renting a holiday apartment alone. The community was desperate. They were watching their island become a monument to despair. And at the center of it all, the epicenter of this spreading darkness, stood a single residential complex with an innocuous name: Bella Vista Villa. To the untrained eye, it was just another apartment building. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that screamed danger. But the numbers told a different story. From 1989 through the early 2000s, more than 20 deaths were documented within those walls. By 2011, at least 26 separate units had become scenes of tragedy. The building had become so notorious that locals whispered a single name for it: the Charcoal Resort. But none of this, none of the horror that followed, would have happened without what occurred in June of 1989. June 1989. The summer heat on Tuna was suffocating, the kind that clings to your skin and makes you question every choice that brought you there. A woman arrived at Bella Vista Villa that month. Her name was Yung Boring. She was in her 30s, dressed simply, moving with the careful deliberation of someone carrying unbearable weight. She brought her 14-year-old son with her. To the landlord, they appeared to be exactly what they claimed: a mother and child seeking refuge during the school break. But witnesses noticed something else. There was no joy in her eyes. No anticipation. Only an emptiness, a deadness that suggested she was moving through the world as a ghost already. She had been betrayed. Her husband had abandoned her for another woman, leaving her not just alone, but stripped of dignity, of purpose, of future. Divorce alone wasn't enough punishment for what she felt. No, she wanted something far darker. She wanted to haunt him. She wanted him to carry her memory like a chain for the rest of his life. She wanted him to never know peace again. And so, in that small concrete holiday flat, Unit 15C, overlooking Tongwan Beach, she made a decision that would change the spiritual landscape of Tuna forever. She would perform a ritual known in Chinese folklore as creating a Jue, a spirit of pure vengeance. In traditional Chinese belief, there is a critical truth about the nature of death and spiritual transformation. When a person dies while wearing the color red, entirely red, their soul cannot move on in the natural way. Their yang energy burns too intensely. It doesn't fade. It transforms. They become something far more dangerous than an ordinary ghost. They become what we call a Jue, a rage-filled entity, anchored to the physical world by obsession and injustice. Unlike normal spirits, a Jue retains its full memory. It knows exactly who wronged it. It can interact physically with the living. It can cause illness, accidents, madness, and it feeds on fear. This is what she wanted to become. First, she turned to her son. At 14, he trusted her completely. He had no idea what was coming. The details vary in the retellings. Some say she poisoned him, others claim she smothered him in his sleep, but the outcome was absolute. She severed her husband's bloodline completely. There would be no heir to carry his name. There would be only her vengeance. Then from her small suitcase she withdrew a traditional red cage pao, a Chinese dress bright as blood. She painted her lips crimson. She painted her fingernails to match. She slipped her feet into embroidered red shoes. Every part of her was red. Every part of her was burning. She tied a rope around the wooden beam in the living room. She stood on a chair. And then she let herself fall into darkness. What happened in that moment, spiritually speaking, was irreversible. She had succeeded. She had become the Jue she intended. And the atmosphere at Bella Vista Villa changed forever. For decades now, residents and visitors have reported inexplicable phenomena. Late at night, people hear the distinctive sound of footsteps outside their units. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound of old-fashioned heels striking tile. But when they open their doors to investigate, the hallway stands empty. The moment they close the door, the clicking resumes, closer now, moving deliberately past their threshold. Some residents have reported something far more disturbing. They've ventured onto the balconies of the upper floors at night, looking out at the beach below. And there, standing motionless on distant balconies, they've seen her. A woman in a red dress. Her hair is dark, her skin pale, but where her face should be, there is only a blur, a void. She doesn't gaze at the ocean. She looks down. She looks at the living. But the phenomenon that defines Bella Vista isn't isolated hauntings. It's something far more sinister. It began subtly. The deaths that followed weren't all concentrated in Unit 15C. They spread. They multiplied. And they seemed to accelerate, as if the building itself had become contagious with despair. There was a night in 2011, or perhaps it was 2008, the dates blur together when there are so many, when 4 university students were celebrating at an open-air food stall near the pier. They were young, loud, alive with the kind of carefree energy that youth brings. They laughed about failed exams and romantic rejections. They drank beer and ate salt and pepper squid. One of them, let's call him Aiming, was the loudest of the group. Confident. Broad-shouldered. The center of every joke. And then, without warning, he stopped. His chopsticks fell to the table. His shoulders collapsed inward. His head tilted at an unnatural angle. His friends noticed the change immediately. Something was wrong. When Aiming opened his mouth, the voice that emerged wasn't his own. It was high-pitched, childlike. The voice of a boy, not a man. "I don't want to eat this," it whimpered. Asterisk, "It tastes bad." Asterisk. His friends froze. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. His eyes had changed, filled with confusion and terror that no 20-year-old should possess. He looked at them, but he didn't recognize them. He looked past them, searching desperately through the crowd. "I want to find my mommy," the voice wept. Asterisk, "She said she was just changing her clothes. She said she would be right back." "Where is she? It's so dark in here." Asterisk. One of his friends grabbed him and shook him violently. The spell broke. Aiming gasped, his body jerking as if pulled from water. He blinked rapidly. The childlike expression vanished, replaced by confusion and exhaustion. When asked what had happened, Aiming had no memory. The last 5 minutes were simply gone. But he complained of a cold that penetrated his bones, a cold that the summer night couldn't explain. He spoke of a crushing sadness in his chest, a feeling of abandonment that made no rational sense. The locals knew what had happened. They whispered about it the next day. The woman had succeeded in her ritual. She had become the Jue she intended. But in her rage, in her obsession with vengeance against her husband, she had abandoned something crucial. She had left her son behind. His spirit, confused, terrified, alone, still wanders Chuna. He searches for his mother, jumping into the bodies of young men, hoping that one of them will be her. Hoping she will come back. Hoping she will finally explain why she left him in the dark. To understand why Bella Vista Villa continues to be a magnet for tragedy decades after that first death, we must understand something fundamental about Chinese spiritual philosophy. Yin energy is the force associated with death, sorrow, coldness, and stagnation. When a location experiences violent or unnatural deaths, especially deaths tied to despair, anger, and injustice, it absorbs this Yin energy. This energy doesn't remain static. It radiates outward, subtly influencing everyone who enters the space. A location with one tragic death carries a certain spiritual weight. But a location with 20 deaths? 30 deaths? That weight becomes almost tangible. Becomes a beacon. The more tragedy that accumulates in a place, the heavier the Yin energy grows. The heavier the Yin energy, the more powerfully it attracts vulnerable individuals. People who are already struggling, already contemplating endings, already resonating with despair. It's a snowball effect. The more deaths that occur, the more likely additional deaths will follow. Chinese folklore emphasizes the connection between emotion and spiritual energy. Places where people die in despair, in anger, in fear, carry those emotions forward. Those emotions become imprinted into the spiritual fabric of the location itself. When vulnerable individuals enter that space, they unknowingly resonate with that accumulated pain. Their own sadness deepens. Their own despair intensifies. What might have been a moment of crisis becomes something catastrophic. But there's something even darker at work here. In Chinese spiritual belief, there exists a concept called dou tai substitution death. It refers to a trapped spirit, someone who died violently, unjustly, or by their own hand, becoming so desperate to escape their limbo state that they attempt to find a replacement. A living person to take their place so the spirit can finally move on. These spirits don't choose randomly. They target the vulnerable. They seek out people who are lonely, grieving, mentally exhausted. And then, methodically, they amplify that sadness. They deepen the hopelessness. They create intrusive, overwhelming despair. They essentially encourage the targeted person toward the same fatal choice the original spirit made. In Bella Vista Villa, this mechanism has been operating for over 30 years. The first Jue, Young Boring, became the anchor. But as additional spirits arrived through subsequent deaths, they didn't settle peacefully. Instead, they found themselves trapped in the same way she was. And so, they too began searching for replacements. They amplified the building's energy. They deepened the despair of vulnerable residents. They became part of the machinery of tragedy. But here's the crucial, tragic irony that most spirits never understand. Substitution death doesn't work. In Taoist and Buddhist belief, karma cannot be transferred. Your suffering originates from your own actions, your own emotions, your own unresolved attachments. You cannot pass that burden to someone else. Causing another person to die doesn't erase your own karma, it multiplies it. It's like attempting to cure poison with more poison. This is why haunted places never heal. They only grow heavier. One tragedy becomes two. Two becomes 10. And before anyone truly notices, an entire location is soaked in the accumulated weight of loss. Today, Bella Vista Villa still stands on Chuna Island. It has never been demolished. The name has never been changed. You can find it on any map. And if you're curious, if you're the kind of person who seeks out dark history, you can actually book a unit through platforms like Airbnb. Some visitors stay with no incident at all. Some pass by without feeling anything unusual. But others report a heaviness they can't explain. An inexplicable sadness. Strange sounds in the night. The sensation of being watched. The locals have clear guidance. Passing by is acceptable. Staying overnight is an unnecessary risk. The building itself seems indifferent to whether it attracts guests or remains empty. The spiritual weight remains constant. The yin energy continues to radiate outward. The spirits within continue their eternal search for replacements, for escape, for a way to transfer their burden to the living. And on certain nights, if you're walking along Tongwan Beach, if the conditions are right, if you're grieving, if you're despairing, if you're spiritually open, you might see her. A woman in a red dress, standing on a distant balcony, looking down at the people below. She's still waiting. She's still searching. And somewhere in the darkness of that building, a boy's spirit is still calling for his mother, still hoping she'll come back, still trapped in the moment she abandoned him for vengeance. If you're listening to this and you're carrying thoughts you're afraid to speak aloud, I want you to know something. You are not broken. You are not alone. The darkness you feel right now, as unbearable as it is not permanent. It's not your final chapter. There are still people you haven't met, moments you haven't lived, versions of yourself you haven't become. Choosing to stay even when it's hard is an act of profound courage. Don't walk this path alone. Let someone hold the weight with you. You deserve understanding, care, and a future that hasn't arrived yet. This is Midnight Narratives. Thank you for joining me in the darkness. I'll see you next time.